Welcome to Alaska Weather, a production of Alaska Public Media and the National Weather Service, Alaska Region. Produced and broadcast daily from the studios of KAKM, Alaska Weather provides complete forecasts, public, marine, and aviation for all of Alaska. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
Indie Alaska is an innovative weekly web series capturing the diverse and colorful lifestyle of Alaskans. Real stories of everyday Alaskans at work and play. Supported in part by Alyeska Pipeline Service Company.
Cook Inlet Tug and Barge is a marine transportation company specializing in harbor services with a primary marketing focus on the Port of Anchorage, providing their customers with quality-based service specifically tailored to their needs.
The National Weather Service.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Meteorologist Dave Snider with the National Weather Service. It is the 23rd of April. Welcome to Alaska Weather. As always, we encourage you to stay up to date with the very latest weather information in your community and village by heading to weather.gov and clicking on Alaska, or go ahead and type in Alaska after the slash there. Weather.gov/Alaska will get you there, or arh.noaa.gov. All take you to the exact same spot. A weather info line, 800-472-0391. Of course, you can find us on your NOAA Weather Radio. Make sure you check that out if you haven't turned that on lately. It's always a good time to check the batteries and make sure you can get the reception that you thought you got last time before you need it, of course. Between Alaska Weather and from all three weather forecast offices and the Tsunami Warning Center across Alaska, you can find information on Twitter, on Facebook under U.S. National Weather Service Alaska, and on YouTube at NWS Alaska, NWS Fairbanks, and NWS Anchorage. And of course, during the afternoon, you get the sneak peek of what's to come with our daily afternoon map briefing. So check that out if you haven't lately. The spring flood potential hasn't changed too much since we talked yesterday. We're still looking at above average flooding potential across the North Slope and across the Chukchi and Beaufort Seacoast. Nothing seen just yet, and across South Central and Southwest, below average conditions. Of course, most of the snow in just about all of these areas, especially in the lower terrain, is gone. We heard from Fairbanks today that the official snow cover now is below 1 inch. So things are changing and quickly, and breakup, as you well know, is probably about to start up. You'll notice some open areas there along the middle Tanana above Fairbanks and above Tanana itself. Most areas are still mostly ice as far as we know. The upper Kuskokwim, we're not really sure about that one right now, but look for this to change, and as it does so, you can follow along just like I am at aprfc.arh.noaa.gov. That stands for the Alaska Pacific River Forecast Center, and they, along with the state of Alaska, are working on River Watch for the Kuskokwim and the Yukon Valleys. And as things change, we'll update this map probably several times a day. You can also use weather.gov/aprfc if you like that one better. So get used to this map. You're going to be seeing it a lot here on Alaska Weather, and of course online as you need it. And if you're in your village, find out with your village authorities and your elders about how to communicate with River Watch as the groups travel up and down the river to pass on your very important river forecast information there and what you're seeing on the ground, so that the Alaska Pacific River Forecast Center can better meet your needs and help to keep your community safe. Fire danger, we're going to be talking about this an awful lot probably through the summer. Very dry conditions already seen with the quick release of the snowmelt already. We're already seeing high fire danger conditions there north of the Alaska Range and east of Fairbanks up toward Big Delta, Delta Junction there. So already we're seeing fire conditions develop as we head into the very early beginnings of fire season. Homer had a brief wildfire yesterday that got out of control, and thankfully that got settled down quickly. But just a sign to remind us all that usually we start talking about fire danger in May. We're talking about it in April this year, and again, conditions are already pretty dry, so be careful out there with your fires. Here's a look out across the Bering Sea in the North Pacific. Obviously, the next game changer will be coming up out of the Central and Northwest Pacific. Still moving south of the chain at this point, but it looks like it will start to work its way northward just a little bit more as we head into the next 24 to 36 hours. It's bringing in more of a northwesterly flow to the western part of the chain. Still seeing some snow showers out there. By and large, everywhere up across the west coast, east of the Pribilofs into the Bering Strait, still dealing with a southerly flow. And because of that, things are warm and the ice is eroding quickly across the Bering. Here's a look at the rest of the Alaska region, and you'll notice most of the eastern Gulf is pretty quiet. We've got a weak area of high pressure right about here that's really holding back any quick advance of cloud cover across south central. Kodiak, you might get brushed with a chance for some rain showers in the coming 24 hours. We've seen some light rainfall across the central parts of southeast. Doesn't look like there's much out there, though. A big chunk of clouds, though, working across the northern territories and into the Alcan border there. It'll be interesting to see how that shapes up. We've seen some cumulus development across the eastern Gulf there, so it wouldn't be really surprising with the cold air aloft and the quick warm-up down below to see a little bit more cumulus buildup, maybe more shower buildup, and well, with the dry weather and the heat we've got, it wouldn't be a really big shocker to see a thunderstorm pop up somewhere a little bit early in the season, but not unheard of and probably not impossible. Across the Arctic coast, you can see the low clouds working from east to west across the area. A few snow showers up around Barrow and Atkasuk earlier today. A weak wave of low pressure centered out across the Gulf. When you look at it with a visible satellite picture like I've got dropped on here, there's really not a lot of moisture collected along that boundary at all. So other than a shift in the winds and maybe a little bit of a temperature drop, if that, that's about all there is with this. Maybe some showers working around Kodiak with that. Brief shower there across the interior, but most of that seems to be getting squashed by that ridge of high pressure across the eastern Gulf. Then you have severe clear across a large part of the 49th, a trough of low pressure across the central chain, and here's that next weather maker we were seeing on the satellite picture a few moments ago. It's going to be a fairly fast mover tonight, working up through the northern parts of the Pacific, right up through Adak and Atka. Chance for some rain and snow with that. There's still enough cold air that we're going to see that mix. No accumulations expected, of course, with the temperatures being so close to, if not even above, that 32-degree mark. Showers hovering around Yakutat to points southward around Gustavus and maybe as close as Haines, perhaps Juneau seeing some sprinkles there. Areas around some of the higher terrain looking at some rain and snow showers. Snow showers a little bit farther north up around Red Dog Mine up toward the western parts of the Brooks Range. Clouds for Nome, that should start to break up a little bit more as we head into Thursday. And our storm across the North Pacific now is still hovering right along the chain, probably right over Atka and still west of Nikolsky. The triple point is south of the chain, and that's going to keep the strongest winds and probably the focus for any turbulence and poor visibility right there along the southern tip of the Alaska Peninsula and very close to Dutch Harbor and Alaska. We'll see rain showers across the central Aleutians. Behind that, rain and snow showers are possible from Kiska all the way out toward Attu. Along the Bering Strait, snow showers are possible there for Tin City up around Shishmaref. Look for a chance for rain and snow showers to combine along the Alcan border, probably starting out as a mix in the morning and then transitioning to more of a rain shower opportunity in the afternoon. South Central, anything that falls will likely be in liquid form. Going on into Friday, well, look at this. We've got more of a warm and southeasterly flow moving into South Central. A better chance for rain showers around Prince William Sound, along the western side of the Sound and all the way down into the Kenai Peninsula, and starting to sneak up Cook Inlet just a little bit more around Kodiak Island, looking for some light rain there, possible through Friday. The winds are going to pick up a little bit more as well, and still looking at a chance for some gales across the central and eastern Aleutians, not only tomorrow, but probably into Friday as well. The strongest winds are going to stay well south of the Alaska Peninsula and Bristol Bay, with more of an offshore flow around the YK Delta. Mainly dry weather around the Seward Peninsula, more clouds than anything else, and we'll probably see some showers across the interior and starting to see a better chance for some rain working in from the south and east on the backside of this ridge here, working up toward Petersburg, Heidelberg, and probably Annette and Ketchikan. Temperatures today, as you know, it was another gorgeous day in most areas in southern Alaska, across southeast. 40s and 50s today around Yakutat 41, Prince William Sound in the mid 40s, Anchorage 46, just shy of 50 around Homer. Lower 50s for Glen Allen. Areas northward into Fairbanks, low 50s for you. Eagle 50 degrees on the button. Just 1 degree shy there in Northway. Around Denali, temperatures were in the lower 50s earlier in the afternoon. Fort Yukon, 36 degrees there, 27 around Arctic Village, 32 in Aniktuvik Pass, Ambler and Bettles, both in the lower 40s. Galena was 44. The Arctic Coast in the teens and 20s. Barrow showing 23. Wainwright was 26. Kotzebue Sound in the 30s and 40s, with big changes happening to the ice there in the coming days for sure. 50 in Nome. Norton Sound in the 30s and 40s. Bethel was showing 51. St. Lawrence Island 28. And around Southwest, you saw temps in the 40s and 50s. King Salmon was 52. Kodiak Island in the lower 40s. 30s and 40s for a good part of the Alaska Peninsula. 43 in Sandpoint. 43 as well for Dutch Harbor and Alaska. Straddling the 40-degree mark in St. Paul and St. George. And temps range from the mid-30s in Shemya to the lower 40s around Atka, or Adak, I should say, earlier this afternoon. Now, for south and west tonight, look for temperatures to hover at or even above freezing from Bethel up the river toward McGrath and into Galena. Teens and 20s for a large part of the north. Barrow and Kaktovik still looking at temperatures at or even below 10 degrees, but warming up. 23 in Fort Yukon. The interior, low to mid 30s. South Central, anywhere from the upper 20s around Seward to the lower 30s around Anchorage. 40 in Kodiak and mid 30s for most of Southeast, with high temperatures for you tomorrow clearing the mid 50s, maybe even approaching 60 for places like Heidelberg and Ketchikan and Annette. South Central in the low to mid 50s there, all the way up into the Mat-Su Valley around Talkeetna 52, Anchorage closer to 50, 44 in Kodiak, low 40s for the chain except for Shemya, of course. Nome, you're looking at 41, Bethel 52. Fairbanks expect mid-50s there. Fort Yukon, 46. Just a sign of the changes on the way for spring and summer. And VFR conditions across northern and eastern parts of the Gulf, mainly around Yakutat and points south, that'll start to clear up a little bit, but also across the west with a wide swath of IFR from St. Matthew all the way down into the chain and around Unalaska Dutch Harbor into the southern tip of the Alaska Peninsula. But your passes should be clear, including Anaktuvik and Adigan Pass. Lake Clark and Merrill Pass expected to be VFR. Rainy Pass should be fine. Windy Pass we expect to be VFR. Isabel Pass should be VFR. Tanita Pass, visual flight rule rules the day. Portage Pass also clear, and Chilcoot and White Pass VFR. Freezing levels show some changes there ahead of the next storm, with the levels reaching as high as 2,000 feet. The surface freezing line now coming north of the Yukon Valley, but still holding just to the west of the Alaska Range and then straddling pretty much following the Gulf Coast all the way from the north to the east. We've got some warmer air across the northern parts of the Yukon and Northwest Territories and also across the North Pacific. That will mainly stay to the south in the coming days. Icing potential is pretty limited. You may see some light to isolated moderate with the moisture working in from east to west. That seems to stay below 10,000 feet, but above 4,000 feet. And some of that could drop as far south as northern parts of Southeast and Yakutat, and then mainly east of Glen Allen up toward Northway and Eagle, and maybe as far west as Fairbanks. Also across the eastern part of the chain, the southern tip of the Alaska Peninsula, and out toward Adak and Atka, below 12,000 but above 4. The jet stream shows low pressure is still sitting across the eastern part of the Gulf into the Pacific Northwest. This is the main corridor of storm activity, and it's going to remain south of Alaska. That should keep us under the influence of high pressure, with weak systems moving across south central and across the Aleutian chain. A lot of what you see here will start to die out the farther east it goes, and that's exactly what we see right now. At 9,000 feet, a broad southerly flow coming in. It's pretty light, about 15 to 25 knots. Low pressure across the eastern chain has the strongest winds focused again south of the areas around Adak, Atka, and Unalaska and Nikolsky. And some of those winds reaching 40 to 75 knots, but if you're flying over the interior, the wind speed should be pretty light, only 10 to 15 knots or so. More of an easterly flow north of the Brooks Range, and coming in across Norton Sound, those winds are only blowing from the south at around 10 knots. We have a little bit of a disturbance here around Haida Gwaii and the Dixon entrance. Those winds only 5 to 10 knots, but they're coming in from more of a north and easterly direction. At 3,000 feet, a similar pattern here across the east. Winds remain fairly light, 10 to 15 knots. Our southerly flow continues at 3,000 feet across south central, across the lower and middle Yukon, and around Bethel, only at 15 knots. Winds across the Bering, still pretty light there as well, 15 to 20 knots or so. We start to see those faster winds pretty much in the same spot with our stacked low pressure system across the central Aleutians tomorrow. We have a northwesterly flow coming across Kiska and Attu at about 20 knots. All in all, things really don't change too much from 9,000 to 3,000 feet. Turbulence potential will focus below 12,000 feet across anywhere west of Sand Point into the eastern chain and across some parts of the central and western Aleutians. Look for light to isolated moderate, and that's about it. Should be a great day to fly, especially if you're flying over the mainland. That's a look at your aviation forecast. We'll be back in just a minute with your ice update and your marine weather. Stay tuned.
Coming up on Destination Tomorrow, we take a look at NASA's Aviation Safety Program. We'll look back at some highlights of the program and find out what the future holds for aviation. All this and more next on Destination Tomorrow.
Found that changing the seats has made a lot of difference and saved a lot of lives. However, there's more we can do. We need to look at the whole system, like changing the structure so that not only do we have the seats stay attached, but energy is taken out of the system through the structure itself. And they're wearing special restraints that keep them in their seat, and also may even put airbag technology in some of the aircraft. And for large airplanes, we're even looking at changing the design so that it will deliberately brake in certain places. then we can determine where not to put hot things or sharp things or fuel lines and things like that so that people can get out or egress through these openings in the large aircraft.
Lisa, a lot of the things that you described are things that NASA and the industry are doing to make flying safer, but is there anything the general public can do to make flying safer?
Yes, you can check your luggage, all of it if possible, because things in the luggage bins do become flying objects in a crash event. Computers, for instance, are very heavy objects, and if they come flying through the aircraft at landing speeds of 200 knots, then you have an issue because it will definitely injure people. People are not replaceable, things are, so if you can check the luggage, then you're doing a great service to prevent injuries in an accident. We want people to walk away from these survivable events and not have any injuries, and we're working hard to get there.
Did you know that NASA researchers are working with industry to better train pilots and airline personnel? In recent years, NASA researchers have developed textbooks and web-based programs that help increase pilot proficiency in an automated cockpit, while also improving training for maintenance crews and inspectors. These programs are increasing awareness and helping to prevent future accidents from ever occurring. In recent years, NASA researchers have also been focused on reducing fuel flammability and in detecting fires aboard aircraft. In fact, NASA recently won the prestigious R&D 100 award for a fire detection system that has a very low false alarm rate. Dust, dirt, and aerosols frequently fool current fire detection systems, creating about 200 false alarms for every real fire. This is problematic for many different reasons. When a fire alarm goes off, a pilot will immediately initiate emergency landing procedures and will divert the flight to the closest airport. This is not only inconvenient, but is also very expensive, costing the airlines about $50,000 for each false alarm. It's clear to see that this new NASA system will not only save money, but also make flying safer.
NASA has also worked to reduce the chance of an explosion inside an aircraft's fuel tank. When some fuel tanks are not completely full, research has found that wiring inside the tank may cause sparking. This sparking could ignite the oxygen contained in the empty space, causing an explosion. To fix this problem, researchers have designed a fuel system that can replace the oxygen in empty spaces with nitrogen. This works well because nitrogen suppresses fire while oxygen feeds it. Coming up, we'll take a look at a unique facility that is designed to test aircraft icing. But first, did you know that even if the engines on a large commercial aircraft fail, it should be able to glide safely to the ground? Most commercial jet aircraft have approximately a 15-to-1 glide ratio, which means it will glide 15 feet for each foot it descends. At this rate, an airplane flying at 35,000 feet can glide for about 525,000 feet, or 100 miles.
Weather conditions play an important role in all flights. Perhaps one of the most dangerous conditions that can affect aircraft is ice. Fortunately, NASA researchers have been using a unique facility that can simulate the icing effects on aircraft.
Thanks for the ice. You know, there's nothing like a beverage chilled with ice during a long flight. Inside an airplane, ice is something passengers desire. However, outside an airplane, ice can be dangerous, especially if it forms on the wings or engines. I had the opportunity to speak with Judy Foss Van Zanti at the NASA Glenn Research Center in Cleveland, Ohio. She's researching the effects of icing on aircraft at a unique facility called the Icing Research Tunnel. Researchers at this facility study the formation of ice on the exterior of aircraft. So while flying, the only ice you'll need to worry about is the ice inside your cup.
Well, I'm standing right here in the Icing Research Tunnel. Right here we create on Earth what it's like for an airplane to fly through an icing cloud up there. To do that, we got to make it windy, cold, and wet. Now right now I'm standing in front of the fan. We have the fan to create the wind, and in the test section, which is a much smaller cross-sectional area, we can get winds up to 400 miles per hour. So that's about as fast as a plane might fly through in an icing environment. We create the cold with our heat exchanger, 1,700 ton. It can cool 500 homes. That's how big it is. We can get from 0 Celsius down to about -20, which is where the icing might occur in nature. And we have spray bars. The spray bars is what makes the icing tunnel. We create the rain. We create a mist that the airplane would fly through. Now the thing about the spray bars is the researchers need to control both how much water is in the cloud, the liquid water content we call it, and how big the drop size is. And we have spray bars specially designed to create those conditions. So in our test section, we create what it's like for a plane to fly through an icing cloud.
So why did NASA build an icing research tunnel?
As it turns out, during World War II, the Allies lost more aircraft to icing than enemy fires. They were trying to fly supplies over the Himalayas. So the Air Corps turned to NACA, that's NASA's predecessor, and asked them to build an icing research tunnel so we could understand what was going on and how to fix the problem.
So what do you test in the icing research tunnel, or the IRT?
What we test in the IRT is what makes sense to test. Now, if you think about it, if you're in an airplane flying through an icing cloud, what surfaces are most critical to keep ice-free? Well, it's the wings, which provide the lift, get you off the ground, and it's the engine inlet, which provides the forward thrust. So we typically can test just those components, just the wing or the engine inlet.
So what happens when ice forms on an airplane's wing? Well, ice can disrupt the airflow over a wing and will eventually cause the airflow to separate. This separation of airflow creates more drag and less lift. If ice continues to form, the wing will no longer produce the appropriate amount of lift needed to keep the airplane in flight. In some cases, ice creates airflow separation over movable parts, like an aileron. This could create handling or control problems, and the plane could suddenly roll.
As the wing is flying through the air, the ice only accumulates around the leading edge. So that's why ice protection systems only wrap around the front part of the wing. The biggest factor in how the ice grows is temperature. So if it's really cold, the water droplet comes in, hits the front part of the wing, and freezes on impact. And you get this nice pointy rime shape. The more dangerous ice comes during warmer conditions, those closer to freezing, where the water comes in, hits the leading edge, and actually runs back a little bit. If that happens, the next droplet might come in, see that droplet that is frozen, and start to grow. So you might get these ram's horns that grow upstream. Now that significantly disrupts your airflow, and that's way off design, and that's very bad.
Time now for a different form of ice. The sea ice edge across the Bering is eroding quickly with the heat coming off of the mainland there. All around Norton Sound, we're seeing diminished ice across the Kuskokwim and the YK Delta there. You're looking at diminished shorefast ice, still some sitting right there in the nooks and crannies in the bays around Nunavak Island, still looking at a little bit of ice there around Macquarie. And then this is obviously well north of the Pribilofs. There's St. Matthew Island. You can see the more solid ice is still there all the way up into the Bering Strait and even still in Kotzebue Sound. Though, again, as we were talking about yesterday, conditions there look like they are starting to change fairly quickly. Here's a look at the marine weather forecast now for southeast. Winds will remain light across the inner waterways, 10 knots or so across the central areas and the north end of the Lynn Canal, but more of a northwesterly flow, picking up speed around 20 knots or south of Petersburg. And around coastal areas, an onshore flow around 10 knots for Yakutat, more of a north and northwesterly flow coming down past Sitka toward Craig around 15 to 20 knots with about 7 to 8 foot seas along the coast. As we get into Friday, it looks like the wind conditions are going to shift completely in different directions. More of an offshore flow all the way from Yakutat to Craig, about 10 to 15 knots with 6 to 8, maybe even 9 feet as you get down to Craig. More of a north and northeasterly flow across the northern and central waterways, and then more of a southeasterly flow now coming up through Annette and Ketchikan, 15 knots with a 3 foot sea as we wrap up the week. So still looks like fairly nice weather, but again, some changes coming in from the south. For Thursday around South Central, a variable flow inside Cook Inlet there. Sea's still running about 5, maybe 4 feet a little bit further north. 3 to 4 feet from the Barren Islands and into Shelikof Strait. A 15-knot wind there, more of a northeasterly flow in Shelikof. A southerly flow east of Kodiak Island. 15-knot winds with a 14-foot sea. 8-foot seas in the western Gulf and variable flow inside of Prince William Sound with a 10-knot wind and only 3-foot seas. By Friday, more of an east and southeasterly wind is developing quickly. A 20 to 25-knot wind there in and outside of Prince William Sound. 25 to 30-knot winds from Resurrection Bay and Seward westward into the Barren Islands. 8-foot seas expected there. A stronger easterly flow coming into Kodiak Island now at 40 knots with a 14-foot sea. And we're still looking at relatively light winds through Cook Inlet, west of the Barren Islands and inside of Shelikof Strait, about 15 to 20 knots. Seas will come up a little bit more, about 4 to 5 feet in the north and still looking at 3 to 4 foot seas in the south. Across the Alaska Peninsula, a southeasterly flow will be predominant across Bristol Bay and south of Sand Point and King Cove, and also on the north side of the peninsula. About 15 to 30 knots or so, 2 to 4 foot seas in the Bering, and 12 to 15 foot seas there south of Sand Point and King Cove. A southerly flow will continue up toward Castle Cape and east of Chignik with 10-foot seas there on Thursday, and that becomes stronger as we head into Friday as the storm system's moving eastward. Up to 40 knots with a 17-foot sea. Southwesterlies coming in behind it with a 12-foot sea, and easterlies are picking up in the Bering around 6 feet around Bristol Bay, and a little bit further south 35-knot winds with a 9-foot sea expected on Friday, again from the east. Thursday in the Aleutians, the western chain's looking at northerly winds, while southeasterlies will come over the Aleutians anywhere from 8 to Unalaska, 25 to 35 knots with 10 to 16-foot seas. On the Bering side, still looking at 30 to 35-knot winds with more of a southerly flow coming out of Unalaska. As we get into Friday, the winds are shifting behind the storm, and as you would expect, a north and westerly flow kicks in. 25 knots, pretty normal across the southern Bering all the way out toward the west, and more of a westerly flow south of the chain, 30 to 35 knots with 15-foot seas south of Nikolsky and Unalaska as you get into Friday. Across the west, again south of Macoriac, the water's pretty much opened up, 25 to 30 knots with 3 to 7-foot seas expected there. Northeasterlies coming out of St. Lawrence Island around 15 to 25 knots with 2 to 4-foot seas in the ice-free waters. As you get into Friday, expect that the northeasterlies will continue there. We get a little bit of a shift around the Pribilofs with a 25-knot wind and an 8-foot sea, and easterlies coming off the YK Delta. And across the Arctic coast, a broad easterly flow into Barrow, 15 to 20 knots, and 15 to 20 knots coming in from more of a north and easterly direction for the Chukchi seacoast. That diminishes somewhat on Friday. We keep our easterly component across the Beaufort seacoast. Winds pick up to 25 knots north of Kaktovik, and easterlies inside Kotzebue Sound at 15 knots. Recapping tonight's weather, spotty afternoon and evening showers, rain and snow across some of the higher terrain in the lower and mid-Yukon Valley. Areas of light rain across the northern Gulf, and a new storm coming up from the North Pacific will cross over the Aleutians as we get into Thursday and Friday. That frontal boundary will reach the Alaska Peninsula as we get into Thursday afternoon, and we'll start to see a few more coastal showers mainly around the northern Gulf and across the eastern Gulf, and most of that rain stays in the northern parts of southeast with rain and snow mix near the Alcan border and snow showers across the Chukchi seacoast. Friday's forecast shows a little bit better chance of rain for south central and southwestern Alaska. Thanks for watching Alaska Weather.
These forecasts are to be used for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
The National Weather Service.